had the whole world at our feet, watching seasons change. Our roads were lined with adventure, mountains in the way couldn't keep us from the sea. Here we stand, open arms. This is home where we are, ever strong in the world that we made. I
good evening everyone. Let's see if this works. If it doesn't work, do let me know on YouTube, but I think it should work. So, good evening everyone. Welcome to another of my live streams. And today's moderator is KrzaQ. You can see his nickname right here. And KrzaQ is going to basically be on our chats. So if you have any questions, then do pass them to KrzaQ. You actually have to write his nickname on our YouTube chat or Discord or IRC, wherever you are, and that way the question will be passed to me, unless you want just KrzaQ to answer it, of course. So that's that. If you are on our IRC channel, you can actually use the !Q and ask a question like that, and that should work as well. Perfect. So, okay. Today's topic is going to be something I've already done on my Polish live stream, so if you've seen it on my Polish live streams, there's going to be no new content. If you do not speak Polish, however, and I know that this topic was actually quite requested, it's going to be basically code review. As in, we're going to review some code written in C, which was written in 2004 by me, and it's actually a custom HTTP server with some server-side constructs. We could call it language if we are, like, you know, feeling in a really like charitable mood, but otherwise I would call it a construct, not really a language. Anyway, so it was written in 2004 by me for my university, well, one of the classes on the university to get a grade I wanted, basically. And it's the best code I could written then, which means it's pretty bad, because that was like 15 years ago, right? Yeah, so we're going to look at that, and I'm going to both look at it from a code quality perspective and comment the code quality, and we are also going to look for some security bugs in the meantime, basically, both on the side of well, basically a black box test, and also from the side of a white box test, which means we are going to do a little poking in the browser, we are going to do a little poking and like just looking at the source code and thinking whether some expression is or isn't correct, or some logic is or isn't correct. So that's the plan for today. Again, if you have any questions, then just ask KrzaQ, and he will let me know about the question. And do let me know if the voice volume is actually fine, because there were some issues on last week's Polish live stream, so yeah, do let me know. Okay then, so let's get to the standard round of, I guess, announcements and answering questions before we start the stream. I don't see any questions, thankfully, so we can probably start the topic quite fast, but let's look at the usual stuff. So starting with this website, which is dev.krzaQ.cc. This is how you read it, and this is how you write it. And this is KrzaQ's website, my moderators. Thank you, KrzaQ, for helping me. And yeah, there's a disturbing lack of new blog posts. So do ask KrzaQ on chat to write something new, but no pressure. Then I guess everyone already saw this. I mean, you cannot open a fridge today without getting a link to this, I guess. At least that's my impression. But I'm still going to give you a link anyway. So here you go. This is a set of new released, I think they were released, at least I got a link from Faustro yesterday. And yeah, these are new vulnerabilities on CPUs. Yay! You know, the Spectre meltdown wave is still continuing, and new research is still being published. So we have Zombie Load, we have Riddle, we have Fallout, we have Store to Leak forwarding, and we have Meltdown UC. So, or is it? Yeah. And there are blog posts related to it. There is also technical white papers, like typical scientific white papers, so there's quite a lot of reading to do. I started reading one of them, but I didn't finish it, so I have no updates. But yeah, it's like the continuation of a trend, basically, and I still expect some more things to appear regarding CPUs. Then something which I guess Euro published this weekend, last weekend, a week ago actually. And he updated his syscall table for Windows, but the interesting thing is that he also made a chart of like how syscalls in Windows NT, which is the blue line here, and the Windows NT kernel, how did they change in each version of Windows, and also how did they change in each version of Win32k, which is another driver providing more syscalls. And there is actually some more story behind it. For example, like he fixed a minor bug with NT4 SP4, which included some names which were not anywhere else, and it turned out that in some versions of Windows NT there is like the Terminal Server Edition, there are additional syscalls which are not in other Windows editions. And yeah, Euro promises us a blog post, and we actually like both with Euro sat down one evening and did some digging around. So I really am looking forward to this blog post, because the research was quite interesting, even if it's, you know, like digging into the details. Anyway, I'm going to give you a link to this Twitter as well, and there is a link to the updated syscall table from Euro, and as well as you can read the rest of the thread, which is usually quite interesting. The typical announcement would be that we are still looking for articles to actually our new magazine called Paged Out, which is going to be a technical zine, which is going to be a free zine as well. And the idea is that basically each article is supposed to be only one page. And I've also published another example article. We already had one from KrzaQ, but I also published another one, which is about this bump out thing. I guess I will show you it in a second. Anyway, we are currently at 22 articles submitted. 13 are still in the process of being reviewed, 9 or like review just going to be started. Then 9 we have already reviewed and approved for publication. So if we reach around here, we will start to finalize the issue. So if you want to submit something, I guess you still have some time before we start finalizing the issue, but the 50 is going to be close to a cutoff date. So yeah, if you want actually your article to be in the first issue of Paged Out magazine, then you have to hurry up. And there is this special initiative actually from the H2HC, which is Hacker to Hacker conference, which is happening in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Basically, the organizers of that conference are basically reserving one speaker slot for the offer of the best security-related technical article in Paged Out's first issue, which means they are also covering the flight to Brazil and the hotel in Brazil for that conference, if the author would actually also agree to speak on that conference on the topic which was published in Paged Out. So that's a special incentive related to security articles in Paged Out if you're interested. I think it's happening in October, the conference itself. Yeah, in October. Anyway, so for that example article, it's loading any day now. Okay, yeah, so this is the article. This is basically, I wanted to give an example of an article for Paged Out, which is on the extreme side, which is basically there is a lot of code. The code looks like it's minimized, but it's actually not minimized. It's actually minimized manually, which means that the like functions or names of variables, or at least some names of variables or names of like global variables, are still readable. So you can actually read this code without, you know, doing any math in your head. You can read it, even though it's not beautiful. And it's an implementation of a Bomberman-like or like Mega Blast-like game, because I'm a fan of these kind of games. And it's actually an implementation which fits on one page, it's in JavaScript, and you can play 1 versus 1. Like bonuses are implemented, and all the typical stuff which is found in these kind of games is implemented. So yeah, this is the extreme part of what the technical article on one page means. A lot of code where the reader can just try to decode the code. basically, and learn something while perhaps transcribing it. And on the other side of a spectrum, of course, we have articles which have basically no code, but only text, which is also somewhat technical. Anyway, if you would be considering writing something for Paged Out, then do look at this Call for Papers page, and we have how to write an article and how to submit it in 5 steps. And the important part is this writing article page, which has a lot of information about the technical specifications there. Basically, most of the questions which you might have about the technical details of the articles are already there. And there are also some templates. We are getting more and more templates, thanks to Matt Miller, Oshogbo, and Viehu. Yeah, this is basically how the page layout looks. So, to get back to our main topic, I see there are 2 questions. There's a question if this is an episode of Roast My Code. It basically is Roast My Code kind of thing where I'm going to roast my own code, but I guess we can also ask KrzaQ at some point to roast some of my newer codes. That would be quite interesting as well. And Igor writes, recently I learned that Unicode Consortium approved onion emoji. Are you excited too? Am I? I don't know. That's interesting. I didn't think I need an onion emoji in my life. Maybe I need it. I don't know. That's an interesting question. Yeah. So by the way, doing that Paged Out magazine, like, setting it up, I am learning things which I didn't imagine I would have to learn. For example, how font licensing works, and I'm reading a lot of font licensing documents and a lot of like blog posts or like articles about how font licensing works, because due to the way we are going to structure our magazine, that's quite important for us. And there's a question from Dashin. Is there a plan to make Paged Out hard copy one day? Basically, it's like this. We are going to give out printable PDF files. So if anyone wants to print it, for example, for a conference and give it out, then totally you can do it. This is the same model which POC or GTFO is following, or which they actually established, because all credit goes to them here. So that's that, and I have a plan, if it actually works and if people are actually excited about the magazine, to issue one special edition every 4 issues, which would be a hard-covered book with all the articles from the last 4 issues. Like a collector's edition, basically, nicely printed, nicely, with a nice cover and so on. So I guess that means yes. Yeah. Any minimum word criteria for the article? KrzaQ says that no less than 0. Yeah, basically that's it. If you have a drawing or a diagram which is educational for people and tells something to people, then that's fine as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be an article per se. It can be a cheat sheet. It can be some kind of a diagram explaining something. It could be a chart explaining something. So basically the author has full control over the page layout. So if you want to have like a chart or a diagram where explaining something, then just go right ahead, right? Okay. So, going to today's topic, you can find the source code for the web server, which we are going to review, on the following site, which is GitHub/Genveil. Okay, no surprises. And then if you go to repositories, you have to go to random stuff. Yeah, random stuff here. And here you will find Gosu SRC. Gosu is the web server. And yeah, most of the thing is here, and this is important. Do not use this code for anything. It's just there so we can review it actually. And it's pretty old. And the only thing I like about the project is this logo, which I've made in, I don't remember with what. I think it wasn't Photoshop, maybe PaintShop Pro or something like that, or maybe even like GIMP. I don't remember in all honesty. Anyway, that's not important. So I'm going to give you a link, and actually under the video you will find the link as well in the the description of this video. There is a link as well, and this is how it looks like actually after you run it. So an important thing to note here that this project is not only a web server, it's also a set of basically a language, a programming language. Like you can think about PHP, a server-side language running within a web server, but the more proper way to think about it is Apache server-side includes. And again, if you saw this content on the Polish livestream blog, on the Polish livestream, there is going to be no new content, so go and watch something more interesting. But if you haven't, then yeah, bear with me. Server-side includes. Let's look at that. And this is looking like it's Polish. Okay, basically SSI or server-side includes was something which was, I guess, like between CGI and CGI being here Common Gateway Interface, which was one of the initial, like before PHP, that was the way folks made interactive web pages, and I mean like server-side interactive web pages, not JavaScript interactive web pages. So yeah, and that was CGI, and then CGI you basically like, in CGI the model was like this. Just to give you a brief explanation, you have the web server, and then there's a protocol which uses environment variables, which uses standard input and standard output, and your web server runs an application which is written in anything like C, Perl, or Python, or whatever was there. And this application basically got standard HTTP headers from the environment variables. It got the post request, like post body, post data, it got it from standard input, and everything which was written into standard output was actually displayed by the web server as the output. So yeah, this was called CGI, and this was pretty popular back in the days. And around the same times, the thing called SSI started to appear, and later also PHP started to appear, which had a little different model of operation. Anyway, so SSI, basically you had this like files which were HTML but with an additional S letter at the beginning, and it worked like this basically. There was a comment, like an HTML comment with some directive and some parameters encoded in XML-like language. For example, if you wanted to include in this place the content of the file quote, then you just write a comment, include virtual, and like the link to the quote, and it would, I think the virtual actually means it would go through the web server. I'm not really sure about that, or just open the file and read it. And there are like a couple of directives only for example, executing some command and so on. So a really simple language which was similar to, it's basically like, I would say like simple batch or bash-like commands included in XML-like looking or HTML-like looking language. And I basically, in my server, I decided to do the same thing. So I'm actually going to show you the source code of one of these pages, of the page which we are now looking at, or maybe, yeah, let's say that. I just need to find it though. Okay, it might be it. So yeah, so this is how my language looked. It was really similar to SSI, but it wasn't identical. And yeah, like for example, if you wanted to set a variable, you used this prefix, which is, just an @ sign, then gosu, like, or this full thing is actually a prefix, like @gosu something, then the name of a command, and then like the name of a variable and the value you want to set it. And you actually could include also another tag in some cases. Well, I don't think here, but for example, if you wanted a variable called this and you wanted to evaluate it versus something else, versus for example a empty string, you would do something like this. You would use if left, and on the left side you have the value of this percentage notation. You might know it from Windows batch because it's the same notation actually. And so if this value contains an empty string, then do something. And this something would be in this case like set then the variable this to quick menu, which means if we do not put anything here, then that means we are actually in the quick menu, which would be this thing. Otherwise, this, as you can see, is actually like set to quick menu if we explicitly click on the link, so this would not get executed. Then I guess if this is the important part, if this is quick menu, then it sets the quick menu variable to active. And if we, I guess, look for this part, then this is actually like highlighting of if I click around, but it's the highlighting of the option I'm in. So it checks if it's active, then it actually renders it this way. Otherwise, if it's not active, if it's passive, it renders it another way. And I guess at the end we're going to just find something which adds the content of whatever we are looking at, and that would be gosu include, and with the source code incme, which incme is, I guess, going to be set to something like, what is it set to? It's going to be by default set to quick menu gosu, and depending on some other, is going to be like link vault gosu, project gosu, and so on. So this is how the language looked like. We are not going to look at it too much, but let's keep that in mind, that it's actually executing a language. And if you if you actually look at the source code itself, there is nothing here, there's just HTML. So it is pretty similar to PHP in the way it works, or pretty similar to actually server-side includes. So this is the website, the web page, and I have like both the web server implemented, and I have an implementation of, I would call it like the most important or used things to me, like a control center or a dashboard for me, which was important to me at, well, in 2003 or 2004. Yeah, for example, it shows disk usage, which is only truncated to, I think, 32 bits, because like, why would I have a hard drive larger than 4 gigabytes, right? And I guess things changed a little from that time. My hard drive is like closer to 4 terabytes right now. Yeah, so as far as the pages go, actually, we have a link vault, which is basically links to the most popular like bookmarks. Okay, this is the word I was looking for. This is bookmarks. So it has the bookmarks. I can add a bookmark to, for example, Gunbale Coldwin PL. I can put some name, which would be like my blog, and some description, my awesome blog. Yeah, and add item, and it did add it here. Then I guess I can like move it upward. Click here again, and my blog is here. So this is the bookmarks. Then projects. Projects are actually, it's scanning the directories on my drive in my code folder, and it's displaying like the version of it, of each of my projects, the state of it. It's reading them from some file which contains all this information. It calculates the code size, the total size, and the description is also from some, I don't remember which file was it exactly, but there was some file which I filled with this information. You know, you might think like a YAML file or something. And if I go click here, all this information is actually available in detail, including the detailed description, a to-do list if any, the change history if a changelog is present in the directory, the license if it's present in the directory, as well as a file list, which is the file list of that given project. And for example, I'm displaying all the files of the source code which you can find here. Well, actually more, because I have some backup version here as well. And I do believe I didn't upload the gosu web page here either. So this is it. And then I have documentation, which is, as in, you know, in all good projects, the best documentation is source code. So there's no documentation, but I'm pretty sure I was going to write it. As you can see, after 15 years, I can say that that didn't happen. Okay, so now we can do a couple of things, but like we can start with try to look for vulnerabilities without looking at the source code first. We'll look for vulnerabilities just playing with the website. And we need to define what is our attack model, or like actually, like what's the threat model here. Because we do have this web server which is running on my box under some user, right? Now, where could an attacker be located, and how could the attacker interact with the web server? So I'm going to assume two scenarios here, or actually three scenarios. One scenario is that an attacker is like totally external to my machine. So the attacker is like somewhere here, and the attacker can issue requests one way or the other to the server, like HTTP requests. And even if the server is actually listening on, the local host only, if I'm running a browser, and I am running a browser on this machine as well, somebody could redirect, like I can go to some server and somebody could redirect me to a local address as well. So my browser would issue a request to this server. So we have to also take into account these kind of attacks, which would be like, for example, XSRF, right? This is a typical kind of an attack. So this is one scenario. Another scenario is there is an attacker already on the box somewhere on some different user, which probably is less privileged. For example, somebody owned my browser, but they cannot go outside of a sandbox, but they still can make HTTP requests to, for example, my server. So this is the second scenario, and the third scenario is that actually, for some reason, this code is running on a shared hosting, and somebody is able to write GoSu files. So we gave somebody access to write GoSu files, and the question is, what can you do with this language? Is this language like trusted enough, or maybe you can read some files which you're not supposed to read, or maybe you cannot read directly files using this language, but you can somehow exploit the language parser and actually jump out of this language into, like native code execution or machine code execution, which would give you the privileges or whatever the website server has. So these are, again, the three scenarios where the security boundary is in different places. It's outside of a machine, it's outside of my user, or like between my user and other users on the machine, or between users in a shared hosting environment. So this is what we will be looking at. Cool. Now, what kind of tools would be useful here? I guess I'm just going to use Chrome, in all honesty, because there isn't going to be too much interesting here. Let's start with this page. We are looking at this page. There are some options. What options do we have here? Well, one is like we can get some info. Let's look at info. We didn't look at it. It's, some thanks page. There are some special thanks, some grids, and like this nice logo which I told you about, and some other stuff, like for example the user agent. So one thing which we did on the Polish live stream is we tried to see if there's an XSS in the user agent, I think there actually is an XSS here. That being said, it's not really exploitable because you cannot, like an attacker cannot really set the user agent here of a browser and then redirect that browser here. So like usually you cannot exploit XSSs which are in the user agent, even though the user agent is, as you can see, echoed here. So the question is, can we, like, for example, change the host or change the IP so that would be actually echoed here, or the URI. I wonder if we can do anything funny with the URI, and we are going to test that in a set when IP, which is fine, and the port, which is also, well, these variables are probably, unless the IP would be a host, like a domain name, then even with domain name, I don't think you can do anything interesting here. The host would be a little bit more interesting, but I'm going to ignore it as well. Let's see if we can do anything funny with the URI, whether we can actually, in Chrome, for example, put an XSS here. But to do that, I think we are going to need another web page, because Chrome is going to be doing nasty things to me and I really don't like it. Let me open a directory with some files. Okay, command total commander. Oh, that's quite funny. My total commander just froze. I hope that doesn't mean that like the disk is actually... Yeah. Okay, I think now it works. Okay, so I'm going to write some code which is going to try to go to some weird URLs and see what happens. And I'm actually going to write this because I'm going to use an iframe, because I know that Chrome is a little bit nasty, and if I do some things like, for example, I would start doing, you know, 2 dots slash, the Chrome might want to actually get rid of it or encode it in some weird way, and I'm not sure if Chrome would actually do the same if I'm going to do an iframe. So let's do an iframe here. Iframe and source here, and we close it, and now we can write here whatever we want to try. So I'm going to copy this URL, and since this is only the URL displayed, what I want to check if I actually put a path traversal here. I know that this file is actually called index.gosu, right? No, gosu. Yeah, this is the same file. So I basically want to... Oh, and it actually added here stuff, but it doesn't include anything else. I want to add to the URL, to the path, something which looks like an XSS, but still opens this page, because it's critical to open this page, because on this page anything is being echoed. And since it's being echoed, I want to, well, be able to exploit the browser this way. So, and the assumption is that this web page which I'm coding here would be opened by, well, me, by the user who is using this page, and therefore I could read, for example, I could execute JavaScript code in the context of this web page, which means I could read all the information which is stored on this web page and interact with each and every button, basically, which is on here, even if it's XSRF protected. I'm not going to go into the details of most of the vulnerability classes, because I guess you kind of know, folks, what's an XSS or what is an XSRF vulnerability. If you don't know, let me know. I can do a quick explanation, but otherwise I'm going to assume you do know indeed what am I talking about. So let's do something like this. I'm going to, so we know it's index gosu, right? Let me make it a little bit bigger. So yeah, and which means we can also try to do something like this. We can go into the ASDF directory, then we can go outside of this directory, and ASDF directory does not exist. But if we go into a directory and then go outside of that directory, then that doesn't really change anything. We are still in the same directory. So this is the same thing, and I actually want to check if this is going to load properly. So to do that, I need to open that file, and furthermore I need this, because I need to check what kind of request is going to be sent. You know what I'm going to do here, like style iframe, yeah, with 100%, and height is going to be, I don't know, let's call it 25 EM. Okay, that's better. Now, if we look here, no, it seems Chrome doesn't really like to send this, or Chrome actually optimized it away because it's not being displayed here, or actually Chrome didn't optimize it away, it was optimized away by the server itself. And by optimized away, I mean the path was changed from a like relative path or relative path expression thingy to an absolute path. but we don't know yet. And before we say this doesn't work, I'm going to check one more thing. And to check that one thing, I do need to open a console, but give me a moment because I forgot to change the font size on my console again. Okay, here we go. So, what's the... Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to run. I wanted to run Firehorn, whatever, but there's... What is the hexadecimal code of a dot? Because I always run... I think it's 2C. It's 2E. Okay, that's my bad. So let's change the dots here to 2E. As in 2E and twice, and let's see if Chrome actually puts, like, allows this to go through. And no, it doesn't. So it seems it's going to, it is optimized away for some reason. What if I actually encode a slash as well, which is 2F? Let's see now. Yeah, and now it works, as you can see, because Chrome was too afraid to optimize it away, like 2F, because while a slash is meaningful in the path, percentage 2F, which is still a slash, is actually passed verbatim, as in it's passed actually as these 3 characters to the website. As you can see, I guess here. No, here. Yeah. So it was passed verbatim, but the dots were actually escaped anyway by Chrome. Whatever. But that's fine, because that means that the web page was still loaded, right? And we can change the ASDF to basically anything we want. And what we want is an XSS as usual. And an XSS would be script, then script again. This is starting to be a little funny because we have another... Oh, actually, no. You know what? I'm not going to go for double scripts. I'm going to go for EMG. Then plus, because plus is an encoding for space. SRCSA plus, and then... yeah, plus is, you probably know, but plus is the same as percentage to be in URL encoding. So that's the same thing. I'm just going to use this. And on error, I want alert 1. So let's see if this works. It doesn't seem to work. I'm not really sure why it doesn't work, but it let us see here. Okay, so this is what was sent. Now I want to see what was actually written in the code. Because maybe anti-XSS protection is what saved us, but if anti-XSS protection is what saved this, then that doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, because that's bypassable. Yeah, it's, as you can see, Chrome actually detected that, hey, this is an XSS attack, but there are tricks to work around it. I'm not going to bother today because we are supposed to focus on the code itself, but as you can see, this XSS works, so we have one XSS vulnerability cross-site scripting, which is already something. Cool. So we have one vulnerability. Let's look if there's anything more interesting here apart from that, but I'm actually going to use this. I guess we can close this, and we can close this. So, yeah, I don't think we could do anything with the get method in a way where we could actually do an XSS. I don't think that's doable. And yeah, we can learn from this web page that there are some plugins loaded, and actually each of these tabs, which within the dashboards, is actually a separate plugin. And there are some functions, but apart from the functions, if you look here, we have also this like restart and shut down links. So this is basically, you know, for an admin or for me to either shut down my dashboard or to reset it in case I'm running a new version. And what we need to check here is if this is XSRF protected. So let's look at, let's inspect this. Actually, not inspect, I wanted to go for the source code. and let's look for restart. And there is nothing interesting here actually. It's just like send to the localhost. This is incorrect, by the way. This shouldn't be localhost. It should be like 127.0.0.1 because that's the port. And there's just a dash server command restart or shutdown. There is no XSRF protection whatsoever. So that means that if somebody would, for example, on some forum or like bulletin board or whatever else on some website, if somebody would set their avatar to link to like this, then if I would enter that forum and start reading, and my browser would find that avatar link and would request it, then my dashboard would either restart or shut down, which isn't so bad because that's, you know, just shutting down something which can be easily restarted. That's not even a DOS attack, I would say. It's like on the brink of being a DOS, a denial of service attack. But this, like regardless, this should be protected with XSRF, and it shouldn't be it shouldn't actually be a GET request, because what might happen is that in some reasons, for example, a browser might issue a request to these pages because the browser might think, oh, the user is likely to click on that and we can preload the page. And if it's just a GET request, then the browser is happy to make it, because what is basically it's not a hard rule, but it's established that GET requests do not modify any content, do not modify the state of the backend in any way, and only POST requests do it. So each of these commands which actually modifies the states, is either restarts the server or it shutdowns the server. Each of these requests should actually be a POST request. So even like not wanting it, the browser could just go and shut down my web page, which is not desired. And I'm actually quite happy right now for this localhost being here, because that means that the browser cannot really request it and cannot really restart my server just by accident, by prefetching some page. Okay, moving on the left, there are some web links. The web links are fine, but we have this run application, and I guess the run application is already something which you should be like, are you able to start a process from a web page? That already sounds a little shady. So let's see how this is actually executed and whether we can abuse it. And to do that, we need to go to the source code again, which is fine. So it was calc, for example. Yeah, and yeah, server command execute and then the process, which is really bad. That's really, really bad because, well, I can execute any process which I have on the hard disk. Now, if I wonder if it's actually restricted to my hard disk. It might not be restricted to my hard disk. We are going to test it in a second. So, but let's test it first if, for example, with curl. Do I have curl on Windows? I do have curl on Windows, which is good. So I'm going to do a curl request to 7001, then port 800, then server CMD, and I guess like I'm no longer running Windows 98. And yes, in 2004 I was still running Windows 98 because I really like that system, especially the SE version, the second edition version. It was my favorite system then, and XP was just gaining ground. XP was a pretty good system, but I only moved when after Service Pack 2 came out, and maybe even that will later. That being said, today is obviously not really that path. It's Windows System 32 and then calc. And if we run it, then it says nothing, but maybe calc is not there, maybe calc is actually here. Okay, it doesn't execute anything for some reason. Where's calc? It's not here. It is here though. Is it in syswow 32 as well? This is syswow 64, sorry. It is here as well. Why didn't it execute my calculator? So, sorry, let's move this auto here. System 32. I'm wondering if it's actually sending a proper request. I'm going to copy this. Yeah, I'm looking for a calculator on any monitor, but I do not see any monitor. Actually, one thing which we can check is that this server does have logging, so I can check in the logs what is actually happening. If I can find... Alright, here are the logs. Let's see if there's anything actually that might explain why my calculator is not running. So it got requests, but it says nothing more. Did I write execute correctly? Okay, let's try it in Chrome. Maybe I'm doing something wrong with curl, or maybe curl is encoding it in a weird way. So let's do this. Oh, and now it works. So I guess it's a problem with curl. Now, what does it give me to run a calculator on localhost? I guess there are two questions now. Does it run a process, a new process, a binary which I point to? Do I have to know the path to that binary? We can check that assumption first. So I'm going to change the... I'm just going to remove the path. I'm removing the path. I'm only leaving execute equals calc.exa, and I'm going to run it. And I don't think it worked, actually. It doesn't seem it worked. I'm going to do another try here, but I'm going to do this. No, it doesn't work. Maybe wget? No, it just doesn't like me. Anyway, so calc doesn't work for some reason. I guess it's not really exploring a path. Another thing I can test is if I actually give any arguments to calc, does it still execute? So, oh wait, I need to do this, and then I'm going to do plus for a space, and I'm going to write some arguments, because calc with arguments tool should still execute. This is what I'm trying to say. And it doesn't execute. Without any arguments, it does execute. So it's probably, I need to point it to a specific binary, and it doesn't really want to run anything which has some parameters, which is a good thing from a security perspective, because it limits it's already a vulnerability. Because if somebody, you know, like just redirects my browser to this, now I'm not clicking any link from you folks right now, because if somebody redirects me to something funny here, okay, without the parameter though, then yeah, that might not be great for me. So I'm not clicking on any links. Anyway, now the thing is that if it's just an executable, then it's pretty, there is no executable, I think. There is no executable like, oh, just give me a remote shell with a passwordless remote shell on that system. Hopefully there is no such executable. So it's pretty limited with what you can do with just one executable. There are a couple of questions here though. One question is, can we upload somehow to that machine an executable? And we will have to keep that question in the back of our mind when reviewing the rest of the code. Another question is, we are on Windows. On Windows there are a lot of funny things which you can do, and one of the funny things which you can do is actually network drives, because Windows by default, all the Win API support the network drives, you know, SMB drive shares and so on. So I'm going to actually put on one of my SMB servers an executable file, and we're going to check if that file gets executed. And to prepare that file, I'm going to do this. So it's just going to be and message box. I never remember what parameters does message box take. So it takes handle to parent window, which we don't care, text pound, and caption. So no, this is the caption, and the text is write to paged out. Yeah, perfect. And type, what type do we want? We want cancel, retry, continue. That's probably the best type. This is a C, so we do have to return 0. It's implicit in C++ for the main function, not for the all functions, but for main function. And now we can compile it. So where are we? We are in the proper directory. And let's compile it. Wait. SASD. My naming is terrible. If you learn something from these streams, do not learn my naming techniques. Okay, static. Let's compile it static just to be sure. Any day now. Okay, and if I run it, it looks like this. Yeah, perfect. So now I'm going to put it on my server. Do I remember where my server is actually? I need to now think where my server is. I'm pretty sure I have it written down somewhere where my server is. Yeah, sorry, I actually have this server mounted on my in my typical setup. It's maybe not bad. And to double check where. Okay, now I have IP. Oh, 2. Okay, sorry. Now I get it. Okay, so this. Okay. So the path is going to be. Do I have any file opened? No. Okay, the path is going to be like this. 2, then genveil, and then a.exe is where I uploaded the file. So the full path will actually be let's just copy the link. Okay, and let's see this. So we want to execute something which is on a network drive. And nothing happened. Let's try again. Okay, nothing happens. So I'm actually going to try to run it from my console, I guess, to make sure I have everything fine, everything good. So start, and this access is denied. Okay, I think I do not have execution parameters on that there, so we can try another thing in that case. I'm going to put it on in a different place where I'm pretty sure I will have the execution rights, and I actually do really want to test it. Okay. Okay, so now I put the file in dtmp and a.exe. And it works if I execute it this way. Now let's see if it works if I execute it like this. Now Windows has by default these shares which are not accessible too much, but I think it should actually work. So let's see. It cannot. Okay, that's a good thing. Or was it like deal with... Oh, this works. Okay, so yeah, like on Windows, for some reason, you usually have shares like admin shares like this, but they are pretty restricted who can access them, and I, as an admin user on this computer, can actually access them. So that's fine, which means I'm going to replace this with another. This is a network share, so it actually creates a network request. And let's see if this works, and it works. So we actually got code execution on the machine thanks to this. Thanks to a network fetching an executable from the network, and thanks to the built-in functionality in the server. Now, if we actually look at the to-do file in the source code, there is this secure the server command special request. Yes, this is a pretty important note in that to-do. Please, myself in the past, please secure it. I know I didn't, but yeah. So there's that. So we already found what? We found an XSRF, we found an XSS, and we found code execution to totally own me. Great, the job passed me. Well done, well written, oh my. And the next thing we can test is, I'm actually also wondering if there is XSS in this functionality, in the bookmarks functionality. So this is one more thing we can test before I start going through the source code. And I'm going to add a new link where the link is going to be. Sorry. I don't have to add HTTP, which is not nice. I actually thought, yeah, because if I would have to specify the protocol as well, I would just write JavaScript colon and then the script, but not in this case. So I'm going to write like anything like this, and then I'm going to do some mg src equals a on error alert 1, and I'm going to put the same here as the link name, but I'm actually going to put alert 2 here, and here I'm going to put alert 3, add item. And oh, I think we actually have the XSS everywhere. So let's look at the source code. Let's look for alert. Yeah, we have XSS here. Nothing is escaped, just Chrome basically saved me from seeing the alert. And the same is here. So this is on the edit page. Now let's see if it's actually here as well. It is, and the Chrome, yeah, doesn't actually help in any way. So, oh my, it seems it didn't work, and yeah, if this doesn't work either, I'm going to remove it because it might get quickly pretty annoying. Speaking of removing it, so we found the second XSS. Speaking of removing it, let's look at if this is properly XSRF protected. So view page source, and here I want to delete it. Action to do deal, like del, delete, or del. Yeah, I think you say delete, whatever. And no, it's again a get request. It's not even a post request. So I'm pretty happy that my browser doesn't like just go left, right, and center and delete stuff with prefetching. But yeah, it should be XSRF protected as well. And I could. This means that using just an XSRF, I think I can actually. Let's look at this. Okay, so this form doesn't have an XSRF protection as well. So using XSRF, I can fill out this form, add a new thing to my link vault, and that new thing could have an XSS attack, so I could escalate from an XSRF into an XSS, which is pretty much great, because that's basically game over, at least from an XSS perspective. Cool. So that's that. Now, I guess one more thing which we can check, if I go here, you do see that I have the path here, so we can check if I put a different path here, for example, if I put ASDF here, what happens. And it still displays the files, it displays the size of the file, so there is no kind of a no kind of a restriction of on the paths I can put here, which is not really good. It's not good. That's actually really broken. Thankfully, I cannot download the content of these files, so I can just list my drive, but I cannot, I cannot still download the files, which is which is good. I guess if the files would be, I don't know, named license or something, then that's not, wouldn't be true. Let's see, sorry, license txt, and I'm going to put ASDF here. No, and leads. Oh, I'm actually spelling license with a C there. So let's do this, license, no. I'm wondering, and this is something we have to check in the source code, where does it go get the context of, the content of this file, and is it XSRF protected as well? So this is one of the things we can start checking, and to do that, let's go to the source code. There are two questions. What happened to the code review that doesn't look like a code review? Yeah, I'm just getting to it. And it seems I cannot use curl, because curl, I don't know, curl probably encodes something in a weird way. I'm not really sure, and that doesn't really matter at all. So we can get to the code review part. So if you look at the repository, then it's actually structured like this. There is the main directory of the server. There is the plugin API, which is basically a plugin API, and then there are the plugins. So since we are actually already in the mindset of looking at the web page, and we want to take a look if where is this coming from in the projects, then we can look at the projects plugin. So this is project manager plugin, and this is the DLL main file where everything is implemented. So this is the source code we are going to review. And now I'm going to do two things at the same time. I'm going to do a source code quality review, as in what I would, if I would get this code at my work, for example, and I would be the reviewer for this code, as in I would supposed to either approve it for it being submitted to the repository, or I would have to add some feedback to it, comments related to the code, to be corrected by the programmer before it can be submitted. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to basically go through the code and add comments, or actually tell you what comments I would add if I would get this code now. And at the same time, I'm going to have in the back of my mind the questions related to security, which we want to verify here as well. Now, as one note about the source code here, the source code style here, is that in different places there are different source code styles, and a common thing is that if if a programmer goes from one company to another company, then the first thing they do is to complain about the style guide for the source code of that company. This is normal, and you should always remember to do it, because that always puts everyone around in a good mood. So I guess like my point on it is that if you're a professional programmer, one thing you realize is that every company is going to have a different source code style guide, and you might even for your different projects have a different style guide, or not even have one written down anywhere, but still apply it. So an important thing is to have for the style to be consistent within the project. And so for example, if I write include without a space, then I assume that the style guide for this project is to write include without a space, and then everywhere else, if I would find include with a space, I would say this is a style guide violation. So yeah, just looking at the source code, you can basically get a feel what is the style guide for this project, and anything which is, a deviation of of that style guide is something you might want to point out. Yes, and like some style guides would actually say that you should have these in an order which is alphabetic. That's not the case here, so I guess we can ignore it. And this is Alt C, by the way, so there are no 2/ comments, there are only this like /*/ comments. This is fine as well. Then we have macros. I guess a typical general comment about macros is do not use macros. And especially do not use macros which have like not meaningful names of the arguments of the parameters, because ABC, it doesn't tell me anything. I don't know what ABC is when I look at it. So, and furthermore, I'm not really sure what ABC is here, so it's pretty weird. As for this code, I think that's actually pretty bad due to one reason. I was going to say it's pretty fine, but there are a couple of things to note here. First thing to note is, because we don't know what B or C is or what A is, then we cannot really understand what this var list get value is. I mean, what is the... We know we can read it that it's some variable list and it gets us some value, but we don't know if B is the list and C is the value or the other way around. I don't know if that matters, but it's something that I would point out. But please select proper variable or proper parameter names here. Another thing is that it actually... I'm not a fan of this notation. This notation is okay from a syntax perspective, because the result of an expression of assigning, this is an assignment, assigning something to a variable, the result of it is actually the value which is being assigned. That's the result of this expression, and we check if that value is, I guess, not 0 or not null, or not false, depending on what type is actually here. I guess we can deduct the type here as being a pointer to something, a pointer to a string, so it checks if the value is not null. And I would actually put it in 2 different lines, because I think personally it's more readable, but it's a nitpick basically, like a small thing which we might want to correct. Another thing which I would point out, and this also depends heavily on the style guide, but for readability purposes, I am not a fan of using this notation for pointers. I prefer to use instead this notation. In case of C, in case of modern C++, that would be null pointer, of course. I prefer it this way. If you prefer it in another way, then that's fine. But for me, it tells me that even if this pointer would be called like A, I know that A is a pointer, because it's being compared with null pointer. If I see like not A, I would say A might be a Boolean value, or it might be some other kind of value. So it's less readable because it doesn't tell you the type of A, and in C, C++, these kind of languages, the types are super important. And I guess like even in higher level languages, the types are also really important, but for different reasons. Now, I was going to say this is somewhat okay still, but there is one problem here, which would be this magical thing called else. As in, let's assume we have the following code. We have if A, get val ABC, and then else do something else. And you might think, looking at this code, right, else execute is here. Looking at this code, you would say, oh, this else here, this else is actually related to this if. But it wouldn't be, because getVal is actually also translated to an if. So this else here would actually be related to this if and not to this if, which makes this super confusing and another reason not to use macros. Instead, this getVal should probably just be a function, and or whatever, or just, I mean, this isn't too much code, just write it in line. That's fine to have error processing, but this looks like we just need var list get value default function, which has a default parameter where we can pass an empty string to be set as default. So these are this line, I don't like it. I would leave 3 comments here saying, dear programmer, fix it. And an important thing here is, if you're writing a lot of code and you're in the process of used to the process of getting your code reviewed, then it's really good to get feedback for that code, because you learn things and you improve your code. And also a fresh pair of eyes on your code usually helps you find the language level problems, not really algorithmical level problems or high level logic problems. That's usually up to you to get it correctly, but language problems like this else case and this case would be one of the things which a reviewer would find. So it's great to have a reviewer for your code. if you're working for a company, think about having a reviewer for your code. And yeah, this could be easily fixed with a set of additional brackets, as you say on chat, as reverse it points on chat. What happens if we compile this as clang plus asan? And this is an excellent question, and we are actually going to talk about that next week, because next week I will grab this code. You see the question here, by the way. I'm going to grab this code and I'm going to compile it with asan, and I'm going to fast parts of it, as I did on my Polish live stream as well. So yeah, it is compilable with asan, and we're going to play with it later. It's an excellent question, by the way. And yeah, at least on the Polish stream, we did find one bug. I don't remember if it was exploitable or not. Okay, then we have global variables. Everyone favors global variables. Don't use global variables because there is usually no need to use global variables. But well, at least the names of variables are somewhat informative, like project number, total code size, or total code and total code size. Sorry, total code and total size. This type is not really great because, I mean, for code size, that's fine. For total size of a directory with our modern sizes of files, where, you know, a 4 gigs but isn't too much anymore, then that should be a 64-bit variable at least. Now, that's one thing, and another thing is that usually it's not okay to usually you want 3 different declarations, or 3 different lines for declaring 3 variables. I guess it's a matter of style, guys, so I might actually not comment on that. Okay, one thing to note is that there are a lot of spaces here, but there are not a lot of spaces here, and there are some more spaces here, so this, I'm not sure about the consistency of that. Okay, then we have a struct, and the struct uses just some, yeah, it's fine. It is pretty meaningful. I wonder why. Okay, this is one thing which I might change. We have like month, we have day of week, and here we have age. Why age and not hour? I mean, it should be hour. Here also, like, we use like month, but we write min instead of minute. We write sec instead of second, and ms instead of milliseconds. So I would probably change it. I mean, if we are writing in one place like the whole verbose version, then we should write the whole verbose version here as well. And here, I'm not really sure, but depends on the style guide, but you probably want a day of week instead, because otherwise there are some combination of words, some quite funny, which you could not read correctly if there is no separation between words. So you probably want an underscore there. So I would comment on that as well. Okay, then we have some text constant. Okay, that's not super bad. I would probably want to have it in a separate file, in a text file, and be loaded instead of being here, because if it's in a text file, you don't need these, you don't need like escape enters, you don't need to escape this, you do not need to do double percentage. It's way more readable to have it in a file and load it. And that's not a lot of work either. I realize it's formatting, and this formatting here is, I would say it's pretty bad because you do not know what is what, but actually it is written down here in the comment. So +1 for having this comment here is good, but it's actually, thanks to it, we know what is put where. But I would actually suggest using a different formatting or actually templating system here than just like this printf formatting things. But this comment here actually saves the day a little. Still, I would like this to be loaded from a file. Okay, same stuff here, and this can, by the way, this can be a global variable. I'm not sure about the naming because it's not really different from the naming of like variables. The constants have the same name as variables, and that's pretty weird. Normally, that's not what you. why did I go here? Oh, it's probably moved me to a next file in the directory. What do I have here? Oh, I have refrain. That was a fun task. Anyway, yeah, you probably want stuff like, for example, k const name, or you want to do const name, depending on your style guide, of course. But you want your global variable, sorry, you want your constants to be distinguishable from your variables, one way or the other. Cool. This is all the same stuff, so I'm just going to scroll through it. And more of the same stuff. I don't know what this is, but okay, it's there, so whatever. This I would comment here. This requires a comment because I don't know what I'm looking at, and the code should be readable. If it's not readable because I get this, then I should have a comment which says this is used for this purpose, and then fine, it can be here. Okay, here I have a plugin command list, and as you can see, I have, like, for example, this command reset, and then I have project reset. Then I have command head, and I have project head. And the bad thing here is that it's not a struct. It should be, because I'm not really sure what this is, and apart from it being a string, and I'm not really sure what this is apart from it being a string. It would be better to have like some struct which has like clearly defined two fields, being like, I'm not sure what's here, but let's say that is like command name and like sorry, so that would be like const char cmd name, for example, and the other would be const char and project like function name. I don't know. I seriously don't know what the other thing is. Yet. Yeah, so if we would have a structure like this, and then we would just basically reuse the same code. The only thing you would have to change it, you would have to put a bracket like this here and a bracket like this here at the end of a line, and everything else still stays the same, but it's way more usable, especially that later when we use it in the code, I'm seriously expecting here to be some mathematical equation to figure out if something is a command or is the function name. So it's going to be like e times 2 plus 1 or something, instead of just using i.cmd name, i.cmd name, which would be way more readable, and even way more readable than the stuff I have currently on my screen. I'm sorry about that. So there would be a major comment about this. Then let's go here. Okay, init initializes the plugin. Yeah, this is already where the math is starting, which I mentioned. Apart from this, this is a pretty standard thing, so it's fine. I would add a const here because this value as never changes, so it's a constant. This I would be here, obviously, but this is an old C version, so that might not have been possible back then. At least I didn't have a compiler which could do that. Yeah, and here is where the math is happening, which I did mention, and it does like some API add, yeah, and this is not readable because I don't know what is here, don't know what is here. If we would actually use the struct which I proposed, that would be way better. But I guess this gives me an idea that these or either these or these are function names, so we'll need to find them soon. Okay, this is the info, which just copies some name like plugin description to the buffer. That's fine. And then there are some functions, and I'm going to look at these functions in the order of, I'm going to find a high level function and then I'm going to go there. So there is this prototype thing. Prototype isn't the greatest because I don't know what parameters it's actually taking, so I would probably comment to the offer of this API for plugins that yeah, like you probably still want to leave the names of the commands, because I don't know what the name of the parameters and arguments, because I don't know what the arguments are and what do they mean. And looking at the code later on, I don't know if it's a global variable, if it's just an argument name, and it's easier to shadow the name of a global variable with a parameter or with a local variable this way. So okay, reset just sets everything to 0. Then head and it out proc. I guess I'm not sure what this is. This is probably in the. This is pretty weird. It looks like it's actually casting a pointer to a function pointer, and then it executes this function pointer, specifying something and then like the size of this something, with the text stop being one of the HTML strings which are upstairs, I guess. Okay, so it just writes something out, that's fine. Then there's the footer, which is filling out some S, and printf is used here, which is fine. I never remember with printf if you have to give it a value which is one less, or if you have to give it a value of the full buffer, because some C functions tend to get the full buffer size and then try to squeeze the 0 terminating the string inside this buffer, and sometimes take the maximal string size and then append after the value still the binary 0 to end the string, which might be a buffer overflow. And that would be something I would normally check. I guess I'm going to check it today as well, because why not? Do we have a Linux console opened? We do not have a Linux console open, so I am going to open a Linux console for us. Yeah. So man printf, sorry, and printf, or that's actually the same. And the name of the parameter is size. So size. Sorry. So the function writes at most size bytes, including the terminating null byte to string, which is great, which means this is correct usage. There is no buffer overflow here, even not an off by 1. That's fine. Then yeah, printf usually returns the number of characters written out, and this looks fine as well. Okay, now what we were looking for, if I remember correctly, is where is this, for example, the license taken from. So I'm going to speed it up a little, and I'm going to look for where the license is taken from. And so I'm going to look for license. Okay, so it opens a file which is called ini, info.ini, and then it actually, oh, this is going to be interesting. And then it actually reads the, what is it? It reads the value from that configuration ini file, from the default section, and it reads the ini, the license. The code is pretty readable here. And then it sets it to license, which was previously set to null. And if there is a license, what happens if there is a license? If there is a license, it does like file sect something, is that like a section? And this is the moment where we look for this function, and we can go through it. Let's look at the parameters first. That's an output as the first parameter. That's a good thing. That's usually how, usually in a style guide, try to either have all the outputs at the beginning or all the outputs at the end. And here we have it at the beginning, not somewhere in the middle, so that's already really good. Then the source, what's the difference between src and fname? I'm not sure what src here refers to. And name buff, I'm also not sure what this refers to, and name, I don't know. So this doesn't, yeah, this isn't readable. I don't know what's the name, I don't know what's the name buff, I know what the fname is because that's a file name, I don't know what src is again. So that's something I would comment about. Maybe, oh, there is no h file. If there would be an h file, I would ask somebody to comment on that. And this function, since it's only used in this file, I would make it static as well, so that it's actually not visible in the namespace of other compilation units, only visible in this namespace. And by compilation units, I mean, I guess, like in the linkable files more than anything else. So what's happening here? There's an F, it checks if there's a file name. If there is no file name, then do something. Oh, that's probably an A, that means like this not applicable thingy. Then otherwise it tries to open it and it takes, oh, source, this is the source directory. Okay, thank you. So that's fine. It opens the file for text. If it cannot open the file, I would comment about this parts, because it actually, this is the same code and it's duplicated. So instead of having it duplicated, there should be a function for this. And a function should be called here. Okay, otherwise it sends a file and it closes. I'm not sure what send file does, but well, I guess the name is pretty descriptive here. Cool, now what I'm really wondering here is, can we use this functionality to leak somehow a random file content from the hard disk? And it's going to be a little harder than I thought, because I actually thought that what we could do is we can probably do a null byte poison here. Now a null byte poison is an attack where we pass through, and that might not work here either, because I'm heavily using C here, and a null byte poison is where you actually need to have a language which is storing strings as length plus data, and then have an underlying C language or C-like language which is actually using the ASCII Z strings, ASCII Z, which means it's 0 terminated, 0. Well, it basically means you have this at the end. And what you do is through HTTP, so going through here, like from above, you put like some directory and then you do this, which inserts a character which will be decoded as a null byte, as this byte. And something like in this length plus data form, something might be appended at the end, like for example, dot like txt, dot ini or whatever, and then it goes here to this layer, and since this layer is actually using 0 terminated strings, it would say, oh, the string is actually terminated here. So this is the way how we remove any additional things attached to our string. And this way, this dir would be actually, our parameter would be what is passed to the file system for opening the file. So we can specify, basically, we could specify any file we like here. And that's actually not going to be the case, because, well, if we are truly operating here in C, then there is no length plus data encoding used anywhere. There's always this encoding which is using, which is basically using C style encoding. But we can check it out, and to check it out, I'm going to, in the ASDF directory, actually create another directory called XYZ. So let me go here and let me actually go to XYZ /XYZ, /XYZ, and we are here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert here, I'm going to insert this 0, 0, and I'm going to see how everything reacts to that. So 0, 0, and yeah, it opens this directory, which is exactly as expected. Now, I guess I would have to create the info file here as well. So let's make it info txt. No, that's info ini, right? Wait, that's wrong directory. Okay, I actually copied info ini. Yeah, here we go. And now, yeah, I was wondering if it would actually open anything, because there are two possibilities here. If we actually, let me open another file to show it to you. There are two possibilities. One possibility is that this, including, I'm going to just use this to denote the null, poison null byte, right? And what might have been added here is this might have been loaded to a length plus data string, and then the slash info ini was appended at the end. So this is one thing. And the other thing which might have happened is that really early on, this was already cut off, and this is what happened. This is what got appended. So in this case, fopen at some point would try to open just ASDF, because this is terminated, this is not existent, as an info file, and that would fail, so no information would be displayed here. But if the second is true, then actually if the cutting off would happen early, then info would be correctly appended and info would be opened, which happened here. And this means basically that, yeah, actually there is no poison null byte. We cannot use poison null byte to, or rather, poison null byte is there, but we cannot use it in a way to trick one string to be concatenated at the very end of issuing a request to the file system. So yeah, so this doesn't really, work. Yeah, just with ASDF works well. I'm going to look quickly at the questions from you folks. The best supervisor writes, I heard OpenBSD. Actually, I'm going to show you the questions. So the questions are at the bottom. Well, not here, more like there. Yes, perfect. So I've heard that OpenBSD has a very clean code base. Do they use some kind of very good coding standard? In honesty, I didn't look too much at OpenBSD. I looked a little more at FreeBSD, but in FreeBSD at least they had a pretty good code quality, and I've heard really good things about OpenBSD's things as well, but I only heard about them, so I have actually no proper information about it. But yeah, it's probably both a good coding style standard and folks who actually really care about the code and get it reviewed pretty, like thoroughly, pretty fully. Yeah. The supervisor writes, the underscore at the beginning screams, I am not standard, the Windows implementation might differ. That is true, the Windows implementation might differ, but I think in the SN printf they do not differ. But you're right, so the supervisor is actually referring to the printfs. SN printfs here. This tells us that it is a Windows function probably, and probably not standard at that. But I'm pretty sure they wouldn't differ at this moment, at this place, but to double check, I'm going to go to Microsoft Developer Network, printf, and if we see here, they have the count. It's not called size, it's called count, and this is maximum number of characters to store, and truncates the output, and then places the terminal at count -1. So this is a correct behavior, this is a good behavior. So and at least up to this point, or where we are interested, it is what we would expect. Okay, but let's think if we can do here something else in this case. Since we cannot really make it open any other file, any other info file, then, or any other file at that, without controlling something like what files are being opened here? That's a good question. So I'm going to look for fopen, and this is more of a security code review part than actually the code review part. And it opens in cmd stats. It opens the source, and the source it gets from, oh my, and what does it do with it? It goes to stats and it closes. Otherwise, this looks quite funny. It opens the file which we control, so sorry, what is this function? The function is called stats. I guess we do not really have a way to check what is being called. Let's go to projects. No, that's fine. I'm not really sure where it is using stats, but okay. It opens the files, it goes to the end, and then if not as, then it closes, but otherwise it doesn't close it. Then it reads stuff to the system, to an instant of the structure from the stats file. Okay, I was confused. Stats is the file descriptor. Okay, then it reads the total code. So it reads some file from a disk, but I don't know how do we actually tell it to. How do we set this src param? Because that might not be the same thing as actually the parameter which I put here. You know what we have to look at? We have to look at the GoSu source code for this. So GoSu, and this is the project GoSu file, so yeah. Okay, and it either executes this file or that file. So project list or project verb. Let's look at project list. Okay, and it opens. Oh, it's actually we do not control it. We do not control it. That's too bad. It actually is controlled by the. Yeah, it's being controlled by the programmer who wrote this. So we might control it more as an attacker who is able to write GoSu files, but we cannot. And this actually brings us to pretty much a dead end where this is concerned, because this is the second file open, and apart from these two file opens, the first one was of course in this filesect file. We can check where the filesect is being called and with what names, but these names are taken from the config, the info.ini, which we do not control as an attacker. We would have to if we would be able to upload a info.ini file, then we might be. Oh, you know what? We can try to do the same trick with using network. Yeah. So here, let me copy this. We can actually try again to do here. We can use. Let's see if we can use a network drive, basically. So 0, 0, 1, then was it D? Do I still have it opened? Like the console? Or did I close it already? Yeah, I might have closed it already. Anyway, doesn't matter. Oh, I found, but I didn't close the calculator. So, whatever. We are going to figure it out. I think it was like this. Then let's use like the temp directory again. And in this temp directory, I'm going to create a file called, I'm going to create a directory called ASDF and create a file called info.ini actually. And I'm going to copy it from the other project, so it looks like this. So this is the same info.ini we used before, though I didn't show it before, I guess. Okay, so let's see if I can enter here. I did enter here, and it did work. So it did a network fetch of that file, which is amazing because now I control info.ini, which means I can edit it, and I can here, for example, try to leak some secret. Let's create a secret.txt in some place, and secret, this is a secret. Okay, and in license I'm going to go to the ASDF secret.txt, and let's see if it works. It doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Oh, because it's a relative path. It's actually being, yeah, so if it's a relative path, that makes it a little bit more complicated. How do I go about it? Because it uses this as my absolute path. But I guess I can use the same trick. And like, because here I'm using this as an emulation of a network server. And now I'm going to use the same thing, not as an emulation of a network server, but actually as something which I want to go after. So let's see if this works. This might not work. Let's do this and then yeah, it might not work. Let's see if this, what happens now. Oh, it actually did work. This is quite funny. I didn't expect it to work, but it turns out that whatever in Windows, and this is not a problem with GoSu, this is a problem in Windows, whatever is processing this path which it gets, if I have done enough of going back, I guess it went to the top of where the actual GoSu is running, and is running on the same drive. That's the only reason I can access it. I cannot really state a drive here, but I might be able to one way or another. But let's say, yeah, I still was able to leak it, which is quite unexpected. I didn't expect it to work, and this is not a bug I found on the Polish livestream. So yeah, this is another bug which we discovered, I guess. And now I'm going to actually show you one more bug, and this bug is also Windows specific. Now, if we want to leak as an attacker, leaking source code is usually pretty important. If we want to leak this index.gosu, as you can see, just looking at the source code in the browser doesn't work because the source code is already processed and only the output HTML is what we have here, right? So how do we go about leaking the index.gosu? Well, one way to do it is actually to use the trick which I just, like the file leak bug which I just discovered, right? Using the info on a network drive which refers to a local file. But there's another funny trick on Windows, and to actually understand the funny trick, we need to go to a different part of GoSu. So let's look at a different part of GoSu, which is in the, not in the plugins, but in the main part of it. And let's look at the HTTP server. This is basically what I want to say, but here is just the parsing, I think, in the where was the main file? Was it called gosu cmd? No, main. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, and here there is basically like, this is the main server code, the one which we should review a bit more, I guess. I guess we could focus more on the code review next week as well, or at least do 15 more minutes of code review, because I'm just skimming to the part which I want to show you. And where is that part? It's in GoSu main. And in GoSu main, this is the main loop of the server, the main loop which is listening, accepting connections, and then actually processing the connections, processing the requests, and sending, either executing GoSu scripts or sending the file content if it operates as, you know, like plain vanilla, plain vanilla HTTP server mode. Now, the part which I'm looking for is basically, I'm looking where the extensions are being evaluated. So I guess to look for extensions, I'm going to look for HTML, yeah. And there are like a couple of references to the string, yeah. Okay, and here is the switch for the file type, and this is the switch which decides what is going to happen if we do what. For example, if it discovers the GoSu file type, it actually goes to a source code parser, and it parses this, and it, like, that's probably not only a parser, it actually executes it. And yeah, this is what executes the GoSu file. So this is where we are falling in this category. We have .gosu, so we fell into this type gosu category, and that's it. And this gets executed. Now, in case of any other type, like for HTML, it sends the header text HTML, and then it probably sends the file data as is this. This is probably the file data. For plain, it sends the same, blah, blah, blah. For images, now what is the default? The default would be, I guess, type other, and in type other, it sends like this MIME type, which is pretty weird. I guess nowadays, we would send application/binary here, or like, application/octet stream, which is basically the same thing, but it just sends it like whatever way, like with this MIME type, which is fine. Now, so what we might want to do here is we might want to actually try to trick the server so that the server thinks that while we are actually opening a gosu file, the server thinks it's actually a different type of file and just sends us the source code instead of executing the gosu source code using this src parser parse, right? And to figure out how to do that, we have to figure out where the f type is actually coming from. And to do that, we need to probably scroll a little bit like higher. I'm going to just search for it. Okay, get real file. Yeah, this is probably the function that we need to look at. And get read file does some processing of a path. It checks a virtual directory. I'm not sure what is a virtual directory. In Apache servers, back in the days, a virtual directory was basically each user had their own subdirectory in their home folder called I think like public HTML, and then you would access it using a tilde sign, the username, and whatever, using a virtual address, which means a URL basically. So okay, but we ignore it, otherwise it's something. Now I need to know if it's empty, then it means it's index gosu, and it goes to I'm using goto here. I apologize. I was young. I was stupid. I didn't know I shouldn't use goto. Goto is actually in some cases in error handling, and see goto is okay. But this way I'm using here to just jump over some code. This is not okay. Like, it's not even error handling, it's just going here. Oh, and here's what I was looking for, get file type. So let's look at the get file type, and get file type is here. So how is the type of a file determined? Okay, so it gets the length of the file name, then it copies the extension or the first 5 characters, depending on I don't know what. So it copies the extension, and then it tries to figure out what is the type. If the extension is equal to gosu, and it's actually using ICMP, ICMP, which means, well, is the, case insensitive, meaning a capital gosu would not bypass this, and this is good. Then some other types, and in the end, I guess it just decides it's type other. So, okay, so we need to somehow make index.gosu, like be able to access index.gosu without actually using the gosu extension, which would mean like something shorter or something longer. So I guess there are a couple of interesting things here. First thing here is, back in the days, there was something called DOS, like Microsoft DOS, the operating system. And the typical file name, well, actually the only available file name format back then was 8.3, which means the file name would be 8 characters and the extension would be 3 characters. And yeah, I'm showing for 3 characters. Now, as you can actually see, gosu isn't 3 characters, and I'm no longer on DOS, but Windows came from the DOS family, and it was compatible with DOS applications for a long time. And Windows introduced actually well, names which don't really have a limit which isn't true. They have like some size which they are restricted to, but apart from that, they are no longer following this limit. That's why we can have sizes like blah 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 dot and blah 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 blah, again with more string. That being said, for old applications, like old DOS applications which could still have been run on Windows, on 32-bit Windows, I think up to even this day, then for that DOS application to be able to access any file which is named like that, they have to rely on this legacy naming fallback mode. And that means that each file, I'm not sure if that's still the default, but that was the default for a long time in Windows, is that each file would actually both have a real name and would have a DOS name, which would follow this specification. So, sorry. So we need to find out what would be the name of index gosu if we would do that. And to do that, I'm going to create a file which is called index.gosu. Now I'm going to open a console here. And if I do dir in this directory, I get like this index.gosu, but dir has a magical flag which shows the old DOS names, but I never remember what the flag is, so we are going to look for it. -x. Yeah, so here we are. It's index_1.gos. So let's see if we can actually open this file. Gos is not gosu. So we would bypass this restriction. If we can open it here. Yes, so we just using old DOS names, we opened index.gosu and we can see the source code without it being rendered, just it's being sent to us. So that's one of the Windows tricks which is quite old and quite surprising, actually trying to determine by using which names a file is accessible on Windows is pretty hard. So that's one of the tricks. Now, there are actually two more tricks which I'm going to show you. So we already have index1.gos, and this was achieved by dir/x. Another thing which is quite funny actually, and which I didn't know back then, is that on Windows, if we have like index.gosu, then if we put a dot at the end, that dot at the end would actually be removed. Furthermore, if we put a space instead of a dot, that space would be removed as well. If we would put a dot and a space and a dot, that would be removed as well as this would be removed. So if we open a file which is called like this, it should bypass the filter as well. So let's put it here. And it works, like a charm. Because when opening the file, Windows API actually removes all the dots and spaces at the end. I don't know why, but it does. And that means that this file would be opened, and since the extension is actually, the extension of this file would be actually this in the best case scenario, but actually it's an empty extension because the last dot is taken into account. So yeah, using this funny pattern, and the pattern is random, like you can just put one dot at the end or one space at the end, we again bypassed the protection. Wow, great job me. Now, there's something I might have known about it that time, but I didn't. Now there's one more thing which is a bug, which was not a bug back then, another trick to bypass this. Now, I was then, as you saw, using Windows 98. Windows 98 was operating on this fat, I think like 32 file system, which is old. It doesn't have proper ACLing and stuff like that. That being said, currently we are using, well, usually NTFS. There are a couple of more file systems available on Windows anyway. NTFS has a thing which is called ADS, which is Alternative Data Streams. That means that each file on Windows, like this is, let's say this is a file name. Each file name on Windows can be associated with several actual data streams. Like usually there's only one. This is the main data of the file, the default one. So like the source code of index.gosu is the default one, this default data stream. But you might have different ones apart from that. For example, one might contain an icon, another one might contain some additional information about the file. For example, if you downloaded a file on Windows back in the days using, for example, Internet Explorer, then that file would contain an additional information saying that this file was downloaded from the internet, and that way if you would actually double click on the file, you would get a warning saying, hey, this file was downloaded from the internet, are you sure you want to run it? And this was stored in the alternative data streams. And actually Linux file systems have usually pretty similar functionality, and I believe all these kinds of alternative data streams were taken from OS X anyway. On Windows, I think these are called like extended attributes. But yeah, you can basically put additional file data there. Now, actually reversing this a little, index.gosu, if we would like to access a data stream, we would usually do it using, like the name of the data stream would be here. I don't remember if, I think it's just one or two columns, doesn't really matter. Now, yeah, I think it was like one column. Anyway, but the name of the default data stream is actually called 2 colons and then data with a $sign at the beginning. So this would be another way to try to bypass the filter using the alternative data stream functionality of NTFS and using the default data stream, because again, the .gosu extension is not equal to .gosu : $data. So this is another way which we can probably bypass it. Let's try opening the normal file, and now let's try to adding the alternative data stream stuff, and we bypassed it again using this NTFS trick. So yeah, this is again something which we looked at the get file type in the source code. We figured out that if there's a way to bypass it, it's to basically try to load the same file using a different extension, and then we use these three tricks to basically bypass the extension. So that's that for today, at least. Now, next time, I guess I'm going to do around 15 more minutes for walking around the source code of the server, and then I will try to write down basically a harness for fuzzing and fuzz some part of the system. On my Polish live streams, I fuzz the HTTP parser, but I'm wondering if we should fuzz something else on the English stream, so we might take a look at it. So I guess that's it for today, and I guess I can shut down it now. So I actually need to copy the link and run it without any annoying tokens for anti-access ref protection. Okay, I did it, and yeah, it doesn't work anymore. Perfect. So if you have any questions, I will answer them now. Otherwise, next week there's going to be a second part of it where, again, I will walk through the code and then fuzz it, and we'll try to find some more bugs. So let's see if there are any questions. Who cares, Rice? Would it work without the terminator and everything after it, so just ASDF? Well, it wouldn't, because it actually expected ASDF to list the directory, and it took the ASDF and it started appending stuff to it like /info ini / whatever the files are from the info ini. So that wouldn't work. It is basically just the default behavior. Aren't you able to create a batch file where you could change the directory and much more? So I'm not sure in what context are you asking, because as you could see, as an attacker, we didn't really have access to, we couldn't really upload any files there. I don't think it is possible to upload any files using this server. I don't remember ever implementing it, but that was 15 years ago. Maybe I did. That's why we used network drives. And on network drives, we could, for example, create a batch file and execute that batch file using the server cmd execute bug we found. The bug here being that API was unprotected in any way. So yeah, but apart from that, and yeah, and you could probably execute a batch file that way too. You couldn't, however, change the directory because even if you could execute the batch file, you could not change the directory for the parent process, which is the server, because it was the parent process. And in a batch file, if you do cd, you actually change the change the current directory for the command processor itself, being cmd.exe here. It's a good question though. Cool. There's a question, since when did you know about MDS? Giving that, what's MDS? Was probably something I showed today, which I don't know is called MDS. Do you mean ADS, like alternative data streams? Or do you mean something else? I'm going to answer the question. Oh, that new Intel vulnerability. From today, I guess. CPU fail, thank you. Yeah, I knew about it from today or yesterday when Foxtrot actually sent the link. I didn't know about it before. So yeah, I'm, I guess, behind with my secret sources that you predict I have. I'm not sure I really have though. Cool, so that's it for today. Thank you for being here. I finally could review some application which is non-trivial and not a CTF task on the English livestream, which I'm really happy about. I'm always nervous about doing it to a real application because, you know, it could be that I find nothing and it could be that I find like O-days, and disclosing O-days on a livestream is not a great thing to do. So I'm really happy that I was able to find this all code and actually go through it today. And yes, I guess that's it for today. So thank you to KrzaQ for being my moderator today. Thank you to everyone who was on the chats today and to all the other viewers. Think about writing an article to Paged Out, and otherwise see you tomorrow if you speak Polish, and see you next week if you don't, if you speak English. Thank you, have a great one, and I'm going to leave you with some music.